right, everyone. Welcome to the Kati G podcast, Women Lawyers Making a Difference. I'm Kati Gostaspi, and the mission of my podcast is for us to realize that we're great and that we can be even greater as women lawyers. And most importantly, how can we bring this greatness to the world through our brand? So why this particular podcast? I do this podcast for two reasons. One, I truly care about humanity deeply, and I want all of us to see how great we really are, to be happier as lawyers, as women, as whatever we do for a living. And second reason, because I am just like you. I struggle with my own feelings of being less than and how to balance a career with a personal life and my authenticity and my integrity and how to bring in caring and love into business in a way that's proper and credible, and some days are good and some days are not. So we all need support and we all need to learn from one another, and we all need a platform where we can do that with ease and safety and group safety consciousness is what I call it. So this time on the Kati Women Lawyers Making a Difference podcast, I am thrilled to have as our guest Shiau-Yen Chin Dennis. She is the managing partner of K&L Gates, their Portland, Oregon office. And I am super excited to have you, Shaiu-Yen. So welcome.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this amazing, project thing that you do. I'm, excited just to be part of it. I'll start with my story. I think you wanted to.
Yeah, I do. But before we get to your story, I wanted to share how you and I met. I always love to go back and remember how I met my guests. So I think you and I were connected on LinkedIn. Yes, for all the audience members, LinkedIn really does work. So I believe it was LinkedIn, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes,
Shaiu-Yen.
it was.
It was LinkedIn, and it's because I am chair this year of diversity and inclusion at the Law Practice Division for the American Bar Association. And I believe we were connected because you do so much in the diversity realm, which you'll share with us. And it's like we became fast friends. And we had this long conversation that probably could have gone an extra 2 hours if we'd let it. And during that conversation, I thought, well, you know what? I just have to have her on the podcast because the goal is to educate one another and support one another and to lead by example. And I think hearing your story, which I'd like for you to tell now, is going to not just inspire us, but really light the way for how one person, you, did it, and how anyone is capable of doing it in their own way, following your inspiration. How's that?
That
So share
sounds
with us.
good. And back to, what you were sharing about LinkedIn and social media and personal branding. I think that's how we truly met. I know that part of what you do is to coach lawyers, build their personal brand. So
Yes.
let me start with my story. It's a journey. I would start sharing that I'm an immigrant just like you, Kathy, right? And that's how we connected.
Yes.
And I spent most of my childhood as a female Chinese Malaysian in a very male dominated hierarchy culture similar to yours. I was different. I was very sassy, a precocious, inquisitive child, always speaking
So
up.
was I.
So that does not endear. We both do not endear ourselves to our culture, correct?
No, not at all.
So I would say fast forward, as a teenager, my family migrated to Sylacauga, Alabama. It's very rural South, mill town, only 13,000 people, still 13,000. I was the first Asian in my high school. There were two Asian families, both owned Chinese restaurant. As far as being cultural shock, I was a cultural shock to my classmates and schoolmates as well. And while growing up in the South, I've learned about the racial differences of black and white, and having been neither black nor white, I created an interesting dynamics within the school. I knew that segregation was over, but also discovered that there was a white students and black students gym at my school.
Wow.
And I didn't belong to either, right? Because I'm not black and I'm not white. I tried to assimilate to the Southern culture, so I cut my long hair. Kathy, can you believe that, in permit, and ended up with the big hairdo of the 80s, remember, with a lot of hairspray?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
I wouldn't want to share my picture, to be honest. So after high school, I went to Auburn University, graduated with international business, major in finance and German. And of course, I couldn't find a job in Alabama. And that's when I went back to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and worked for a year. And came back to the US, got married, enrolled in a Master of Science of Education at NC State. And during grad school, I had a child, worked full time as a HR practitioner, supporting, a bunch of employees. And I really miss international business. This is where I took a job at the World Trade Center and I became the executive director for the World Trade Center in North Carolina. I was very involved in economic development, trade issues, hosted the Prime Minister of Canada, President of Uruguay, and many ambassadors. And I'm saying
Wow.
this, I'm telling the story, is I know most lawyers went straight to law school. For me, it was a journey. I did not go to law school directly. I think that as an immigrant and you're the first of everything, I was the oldest child. You never imagine that you can be a lawyer and that you could go to law school. Um, so I think I'm hoping that would inspire others to know that
Mhm.
if there's ever something you want to do, you can inspire you to do things and be the first. And while in this position, I decided to go to law school. At that point, my children I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. We couldn't move out of the city. I ended up commuting 120 miles every day to go to law school.
Why did you
uh,
decide to go to law school?
so
Tell us.
here's the story, Kate. I mean, in one of my position, I was discriminated against, and it was not a pleasant experience because despite having graduated with honors from the U.S. University, accepted as a graduate student at NC State, my supervisor one day told me that I spoke with an accent and they need me to fix my English and suggested that I take an ESL class, which at that time of my career, being very Asian and, trying to accommodate, I did everything. I went and took an ESL class, which, remembering back, my professor didn't understand why I was even there, but I did it anyway. And at the end of the day, I ended up, leaving the company. I did file an EEOC complaint, but did not have the courage to do more. I was so afraid. You're always afraid of something when you're an immigrant, right? You just,
Mhm.
um, so I think at that point it planted a seed, a mustard seed that continued to grow as I advanced in my career. And while at the World Trade Center, North Carolina, that's where I met a number of lawyers, and they sort of inspire me to go to law school. In fact, one of my mentor, he's like, I am very much into diversity and inclusion, and it's so important to have ally white males and white men. And he's definitely southern white man, and he asked what I want to do with my life and my career, and that's how he encouraged me also to go to law school. So that's how I ended up going
I'm
to law
going to
school.
stop you right there. I want to draw out a point you just made because you talk with such ease and grace, and I want to make sure our listeners don't miss these subtleties. It is not easy for for people to ask a white male if you're not a white male for support because I found there's a lot of nuances around that. Find women shy away from that or assume they're not good enough or maybe they're angry because at the white man, and there's all sorts of reasons why we don't reach out, but you didn't have any of those fears, right? And I'm so glad you didn't, because it's not that way. That's a bad assumption, presumption we make that might be embedded in some truths or some realities for some people, but not necessarily the ultimate truth, because you did it and it worked out tremendously to your favor, correct?
Correct. And he still remained, I still keep in touch with him, and he's very proud of, my career and where I am. But I think, good point, Kathy, because this is the other thing. We also have, as diverse individual, have assumptions that white men do not want to mentor, or we have some other, idea in our head that we can't reach out to them, or they're not willing to help us. And for me, maybe it's because of my sassiness. I don't know. And don't take no for an answer. I don't know what it is. But, for me, I realize living in the South and always being the only Asian, if I had waited for an Asian woman to show up to mentor me, I am like sitting there waiting for Superman to show up, right? It never happened. It would never
Yes,
be.
right. And how often do we sit on the sidelines
Right.
waiting, but also victimizing ourselves? And then that gives us the reason to be angry because it's not working out. And so we're not going to blame ourselves for not stepping up. We're going to like turn the finger externally because it's much easier to find someone else to blame. And look, I am not saying, audience, that people don't victimize other people. It's fair, it's legitimate. I have sat in the victim seat many times. But as a man or a woman, it doesn't really advance the cause of supporting one another and helping one another and bringing your value and your brand to the world. So I just want to make that point. So keep going. Wonderful.
And Kathy, here's the other point that I want to say. And while we're on this idea of being a victim, like you have shared, it's not like you and I have not been a victim before. It's not like you and I have never been discriminated against. I mean, remember, I am in the South, and was
Yes.
pushed out. Was asked to take ESL class, and it didn't feel good. It was hurtful. I'm sure I cried bucket over it, but I know, I mean, even at Auburn University, when I was trying to find a part-time job, I mean, I would see posters that say help wanted, but when I go into the store, immediately that said that there's no posting, right? It's
Mm,
all these other experiences that are very painful, but I don't allow those to define who I am. And you
yes.
can allow that to define who you are. And I'm not saying it's okay to have those practices or behavior or condoning it, but it is also up to us to control how we respond to that. And I think that's real important. And the way I choose to respond to it, it's chalked it up that another window will open for me. And it did. And if, but for that experience, I would not even have really considered going to law school. And if I had met if I have not met Jerry Oliver, and even if I have met Jerry Oliver, who's my mentor, and I totally give a shout out to Jerry. When he approached me and said, "Hey, what do you want to do with your life?" and and he suggested or talked to me about being a lawyer, I may not even have been open to it, right? If I didn't have the negative experience.
Yeah, I absolutely see that. That's such a profound teaching. It really is that we are in control of how we respond to those doors that close in front of us. And then we are in control of the ones we choose to pursue to open. And that is such an empowering note, not just for women, but for men as well, for people. Because, yes, the focus of this podcast is for women lawyers, but really, if you step back at it, this is a human challenge that we have. I see it in men and in women. Not only have I lived it, but I think it's gender neutral. But I think as women, we turn to internalize it worse, or maybe we externalize it because it's more common for women to show up and say that. But I think men suffer quietly as a result of it. So, food for thought. So, go ahead with the rest of your story. So, you went to law school and you did all that driving back and forth from what I remember. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of driving.
A lot of driving, pay for my school, very little money, live on caffeine and eat ramen noodles. So that's
That sounds like a lot of people's story, including my own.
exactly. And I was lucky enough, I have a different career path. Did not go straight to law firm. I went to work for a company called SAS, a large global software company. I was in-house counsel for many years, and from there I lateral into K&L Gates, a law firm. The path itself wasn't easy. Obviously, sitting here looking back today as an office managing partner, I made it, and I didn't even recognize I made it until someone came up to me, and I'll tell that story in a minute. But what I wanted to share is, the path in law firm life or even in corporate America it's never easy, right? It's
Right,
always, from my own experience, I moved my family from North Carolina to Oregon, 3,000 miles to take this job at the firm. And I wasn't really particularly welcome by then. We had a large group of white privileged male partners, very pro. They try to run me out of the firm. And I could tell, like, I know who I am, and that's very important. That's another key point. Know who you
Mm,
are. I
yes.
knew that I could outwork and outlast anyone. And I wouldn't allow a group of white privileged males run me out of this town that's Portland. And I refused to pack my bags and tuck my tail and move back to the South unless I choose to. So I suppose I have grits. I suppose that I didn't give myself self pity. And I suppose as a senior associate, being a firm this size, I knew that I had to get my hours, and I figured out a way outside of Portland to get the support. So with that say, I outlast them. I made equity partner, which, if you look at the numbers, Asian woman equity partner of AmLaw 100, you're really only looking at 1.2%. I'm not even adding the immigrant category to it. And I'm not adding the percentage of office managing partner. I think if you look around, there are really not that many Asian women managing partner or Asian managing partner for AmLaw 100. I also practice corporate M&A deals. And even in that category, to be a woman and then an Asian woman diverse M&A lawyer doing deals, it's also a very small percentage. In fact, one of the headhunter told me, um, and he shared, you should realize you're a special snowflake because there really not that many of you. And I guess another lesson I've learned is like to find your worth sometimes, take the headhunter call. I mean, you may or may not do anything with it, but it does makes you feel like, you know
Yes.
what, I don't know the
Yes.
market, I don't know my self-worth. And I want to focus at the end about finding your voice. I think to be able to find your voice, you need to find your own self-worth.
Absolutely. And you're so well said. This is really why I stopped practicing securities laws all those years ago and started doing the brand development work, because I found that as professionals, we were not willing, we didn't have the roadmap or the blueprint to find our voice. It took me 7 long, painful years to find my voice. And I thought it shouldn't have to be this painful or difficult for others, but there should definitely be a blueprint that they can use. And so I love the phrase special snowflake, because I think everyone is special, but we've lost that ability to see that. So if looking and taking the headhunter calls boosts your self confidence, then go for it like you did, because I think that is a worthwhile example of a route we can take to help us, buoy our self confidence, and also to realize that I love the phrase special snowflake, because all snowflakes are different. And yet, all
Correct.
snowflakes are special, meaning that we shouldn't be the same and we should embrace those differences. And that's the other thing brand development work I found does. To your point of know thyself, to thyself be true. You can't until you know thyself. And you're certainly one of those people that does know themselves. And I honor that path that you took to get there.
And even getting where I am, we talk about this for 2 hours. It wasn't easy. And culturally, from where we both came from, and for me, coming from Asian, the Asian culture is so different. You're taught to be so humble and not even share your thoughts, or your achievement, because sharing it is not what culturally expected. And learning how to overcome your cultural norm, um, and even with my own achievement, and I do, when I was promoted to be equity partner, my office managing partner Dan was like, Shaiu-Yen, you need to share your voice. And I very reluctantly, because public speaking is not my strength, and it's definitely something I've worked on, and I'm getting better each day with it. um, I started to do presentations with a group, and I have to say, a young person who, she was like me, came up to me and basically shared and said, "Hey, Shaiu-Yen, you really need to share your story. You need to share your voice, because you have a story in a life it's very inspirational, and it inspired me, and people need to hear it." And it was an aha moment for me. And I wanted to say that you can learn from even different people, right? And for me, even as advanced as I was in my career, it was an aha moment. And I realized she's right. I need to stop being on a hamster wheel and sit back and reflect and look at my life and look at my career and try to determine what do I want next in my career path in my life, and how do I want to be, what kind of leader do I want to be, and finding my voice and using my voice. I want to say that, a couple of quotes. um, like, for example, for Meghan Markle, women don't need to find a voice. They already have a voice. They need to feel empowered to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
Stephen Covey, in his book, talks about finding your voice. And Covey said that each of one of us is born with a unique set of gifts that we can share with the world if we choose to do so. Just like you said, a special snowflake. Each and every one of us is different. And he said, find your voice, inspire others to find theirs. And it's basically his way of saying your voice is your unique personal significance, and those who inspire others to find theirs are leaders needed now and for the future. And I think, Kathy, for you, you're saying in your personal branding, each of us are unique in how you find your voice and personal brand yourself.
Absolutely. And part of the process is discovering, not discovering, unearthing people's natural talents and having us really see ourselves beyond the label. When I left practice, I had been a lawyer for so long, I did not know who I was if I wasn't calling myself a lawyer. And that was really significant because it was not allowing me to find who I really was, my natural talents, my true voice, and use that to inspire others, but build a business around it and grow a business, because then everything comes with ease and everything flourishes because you're grounded in who you are, not what you do. And so everything you're saying, you're a perfect example of what I hope for every lawyer who chooses to find their voice and develop their brand. Because I'm going to ask you this question. I already know the answer. The biggest impediment was what? The biggest impediment was that this is not an easy endeavor. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't require any substantive legal left brain knowledge that we're trained in. It's all about us going deep inside and figuring this out, which isn't always easy. And so we tend to ignore it, and we hope that conventional wisdom plays out, right? That keep your head down, do the legal work, and everything else will fall into place. Well, it doesn't work that way, right?
Right. And the hard work really come from yourself. And as lawyers, we're so trained to think about rules, analysis, and going back to law school, IRAC, right? But
Yes.
I think personal work and personal branding and leading from inside, leading with purpose, um, all those don't really, there are tons of books you can read, obviously, podcasts. And yeah, I think that it's beneficial to work with someone like you, Cassie, because you ask the hard questions, right? So that then you can go back and contemplate and reflect on what exactly is it that you want, who you are to be. Because I think that I realized there were part of my life when I was just a young immigrant and just wanting to prove myself in America. And then a part of my life that I worked so hard, I'm a mom, and I'm so defined by who I am as a mom. And then there's part of my life now that I lead back, and you know, it was through the eyes of a young person at a presentation that made me realize they see you as a leader. They see you different than who you see yourself. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that I could have achieved that if I didn't have someone nudging me. And for me, I'm a deep thinker, so that sometimes, doesn't allow me to get a lot of sleep because I think a lot. Then you realize that I am at a different path, whether I want it or not. And because I am an office managing partner, because, my team looked to me to lead them during COVID. Um, Kathy, we could do a podcast about leading through challenges because
I
I
may
like,
have you come back for part two for sure. Yeah,
because last
absolutely.
year it was like leading to COVID. There were wildfires in Oregon. There were protests
Yeah.
downtown. It was all the above, and with that, you realize that there is how you see yourself, and there's how others see you, and how others see you also leads into how you lead and what you want to achieve. Um,
Absolutely. And I often tell my clients, brand perception is two parts. It's how I want you to see yourself so you're in control of how you convey the message and the perception. And you're just in control and know who you are. But there is the reality that people's perception is reality. So it matters. And you can use how people see you as a way to fine tune your own baseline and grow from there. And then you can't change people's opinions necessarily right away, but you can take it into account and use it as a way to be able to bring value to those you want to serve, because you can course correct with their perceptions. And I think that's what makes you such a smart woman, or a
Right.
smart human being, that you take everything into account and you're not afraid to see different perspectives and meld them into who you are. So I definitely want you to come back and talk about the leadership perspective, because that's a whole different conversation. But it's so integral to who we are because we wear different hats. And so the different hats are still on one head, which is the human being, with all the experiences and the stories and the special snowflake aspect. But you just choose a different hat and put it on, and then you turn a different side of your brand, I call it, to your audience. And that's something we can't ignore. But it's not always easy to step up and lead either, right? Because what if you fail? What if it's not good enough? What if you succeed? Even worse than failing, right? Then you're gonna have to shine your light bright, and wow, what would that be like to step into success, right? And those are things that we talk about a lot. So I would love for you to come back and really delve into the leadership aspect and succeeding as a female woman leader, because it's a whole different vantage point. So I want to go right now into part two of my podcast interview with all my guests. This is where people, I mean, we've learned so much from you. I can't imagine we could learn more, but really, this is where we switch and I become your coach and you bring an issue that you've been dealing with or you have on your plate. And I'm sure as managing partner of an office at an AmLaw firm, 100 firm, you have lots of things, but maybe it's a personal thing in your life, something that we can work through where the listener learns and you of course get coached. So what is that challenge or that thing that's on your mind?
I think the challenge, Kathy, it's being a leader, but you're not a white male, but you're an Asian woman in a very male dominated, whether it's industry. I assume your audience are they're lawyers if they're
Yes.
in law. If they're not, if they're investment banker, those are all very male dominated industry, right? And leading in that environment, because my peers are mostly white men, and I don't have anything against white men. It's I'm just saying in that environment, it's not easy, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's a fair challenge, and I'm glad you brought that challenge to the table because it's legitimate and it should be something you're thinking about. But here's my advice. I would ask you not to think about it, and I don't think you do, but just to make sure for the audience's purposes too, I implore everyone not to think about it in terms of a negative. It's just literally what it is. Like some people have curly hair, some people have straight hair, some people are tall, some people are short. So it's just a distinction. And a distinction is something we can use to our benefit to help us draw out the differences that are complementary to other people, not that cause division and cause us to be different and step back and think we're not good enough as a result of those differences. So it's admirable and it's a challenge to come to the table because you're not a white man, right? But you are in a leadership position. And yet it goes back to the same thing that we would do regardless, hopefully, is that just recognize that people are different. And so I often talk about empathy and compassion. And in fact, we're doing a ABA CLE around effective communication to avoid malpractice because ineffective communication does lead to malpractice. But for your purposes, that's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about effective communication and understanding that everyone is different and putting yourself in other people's shoes, that empathy, that compassion, to be able to just say for a moment, maybe I don't agree with you. Maybe I've never been a white man, so I obviously can't see it through your eyes, but I can do my best because that honors who that other person is. And that's just what we're talking about when people talk about love in business, right? It's
Right.
not romantic, mushy love. It's not inappropriate love. It's just being able to have affinity for somebody else in saying, I welcome your differences, I welcome your point of view, and I welcome you to the table so that we can collaborate for the highest good and be able to bring a work product to those that we support and those clients that we have, because that work product is now richer and has been vetted by different points of view. And wow, that is so powerful. So I have a feeling you already do that, but there are moments where I'm sure you've faced what I faced, where it's challenging because perhaps it's the way I say it is not always, it doesn't always come that easy because there is another person on the other side of the table that comes with their own baggage, right? We all have our
Right.
baggage. And if they bring that baggage to the table, they might not make it that easy for you. However, the trick is to always sidestep that baggage and just see that person for who they truly are, right? The divine in them really is what I call it. So I'm not getting religious because I'm not religious, but the spirituality really helps in business in being able to see that that person is just the same as those people in your personal life that you care about. There's really no difference because we all put our pants on one leg at a time. And that helps in diversity, that helps us to get along, that helps in communication, that leads to greater outcomes in negotiations. And it really does move the needle in terms of not just avoiding malpractice, but having negotiations and transactions and dialogue go so much smoother. So when we talk about women in the boardroom, that is the gift of women. It's not that we're better than men. It's just we're wired differently. It's just what it is, just that simple, that we are truly more collaborative because we're wired that way. Because back in the day, women were gathering the berries in the meadows with one another while the men went out to hunt that one deer. There was one deer and it was supposed to feed your family, and there was one man and his buddies chasing that one deer. So they were more competitive, they were more single focused as a result of that, and women were together collaboratively, really leading and running the show because we had diffused awareness. We could see all the berries in the meadows and the fields. And by the way, this is not my research, I do a lot of research, but this research that I'm speaking of now on the distinctions between men and women come from a woman named Alison Armstrong. So if you want to Google Alison Armstrong and her research around the distinction between men and women, there's a plethora of information there. But I think that is a gift that we have. So when you're sitting there at the table with white men, look at all the things you guys have in common, which is the greater good, and ignore all the things that they might bring to the table that might bring division. Rise above that, because I can tell you're a person that does that anyway, because you've done that throughout your career to get to where you are. You took those ESL classes, you rose above it. It didn't define you, and neither does the distinctions that we have. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does
Does
make
that
sense.
help?
Yes, sometimes even though I'm a quite a confident person, it's helpful to hear it from someone else. It's just like it's like helpful to hear from a headhunter that you're a special snowflake, right? It's just, or a moment, or even a young person saying, "Hey, you have a voice. Why don't you use it more?" Right? And learning, because in a nutshell, most I mean, for me, I'm an introvert. So for the longest time, and having gone through that experience where your employer is judging you on your language skills, on how you speak, I was petrified to do public speaking. So it took a lot of work, internal work, to overcome that and to overcome that fear. Um, but now I just got to focus on like the greater good, like you say, Cassie, and
Yeah,
what we can all
yeah.
achieve through it.
And you've got that. So I want to thank you so much for being on my show. I mean, I will have you back for part 2 of this, and we'll focus on leadership because I want my the listeners to digest this part of it for now and see that anything is possible. And by the way, you don't have to be an immigrant refugee like Shiau-Yen and I are to achieve these results. You just have to be willing to do the inner work, like she just said so brilliantly, and do it at your level. There is no competition. The way she did it, the way I do it your way. Take it baby steps, and know that whatever you choose to do is advancing the ball on diversity, inclusion in your career, in our abilities to have a society and a legal practice where everyone thrives and no one is forgotten, and that truly the clients are the beneficiaries of it all. So I want to thank you, Cheyenne, for being on my show. If people want to find you and more about you, what URL, where can we find you?
It would be K&L Gates, Portland office.
Wonderful. So if anyone's looking to get a hold of you,
www.klgates.com.
perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes so you guys can have access to that there. And I want to thank you for being with us. And any last thought you want to leave us with?
Last thought, it's, you take charge. You are in charge. You are in control. Like you have talked about, Kathy, whether you are in control of doing the hard work of self-reflection, self-evaluation, finding who you are, and taking the baby steps. At the end of the day, it is you who can make the change.
Beautiful. Well said. And I'd like to end on that note. Thank you for being my guest. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to listen. Remember, your brand matters, you matter, and go out there as women lawyers and as people in general, whoever you are listening, and find your voice, find who you are, develop your brand, put it out to the market in the right way, and be that difference that Gandhi, I believe, said that you want to see in the world, because it does really start with us. And until next time, Kentichi out.